What's good guys, it's your girl Amelia from The Beat of Adventure, back with a brand new video. And today I wanted to talk a little about shooting in harsh light or unpredictable light without using a diffuser or reflector or any filters. So a lot of the videos out there on this topic are more aimed at like portrait photography with models, but the things we're going to talk about today should help with all different types of photography and also with video a bit as well. Someone has dumped an old toilet bowl at the entrance to our regional park. Like, who does that? Now, shooting when it's golden hour or blue hour, or even when it's overcast and the clouds are creating a giant, big, beautiful softbox, that's awesome, but it's not going to make me a better photographer. And also, it's not practical. Photography, much like all creative pursuits, is just allegory for life. It's unpredictable. You're not always going to be able to choose when you shoot, and the available light shouldn't dictate your creativity. Alright, so my first tip is the hand test. You're simply going to put your hand out in front of you and then do a circle and see when the light changes and looks softer or more pleasing. And you can also tilt your hand to see if the person needs to tilt their head up or down to get a better and more flattering light. And it's really good for when you're vlogging. This image looks absolutely shit, but look what happens if I turn this way. My face is evenly lit and it just looks so much better. Okay, my next tip also relates to people, but it's to wear sunglasses because it will help cut out the kind of raccoon eyes. If you're on an angle where the light is kind of just creating a lot of shadows on the face, the sunglasses just take away the raccoon eyes, much better. And also it stops you from squinting if you have to face the sun. Like, that is not a situation that you want in your video. It's super bright, so. My next tip is look for things where the light is being blocked. Trees, buildings, walls, there's so many things in our environment that actually blocks really, really harsh light. And this isn't just about things that you can move around, like a person or an object. Think a landmark or a building or something. Walk around the whole thing and find that spot where the light is getting blocked. Wait for that person in the street to cross into that shadow. So this tip is really all about just looking before you shoot and training your eye, which actually brings me to the next tip. Use interesting shadows, dappled light, and harsh lines to your advantage. All of these things turn the downside of harsh light into a straight up positive. I love the photo that I snapped of this gentleman in Tokyo because it made a really interesting image. You just don't get the same level of contrast when the sun is lower in the sky. So use that to your advantage. Next up, you want to use the contrast of light and shade to direct your viewer's attention and to shape the scene. Plus, it can kind of add leading lines when you don't have any naturally. You can kind of sculpt your scene. The birds are starting to go crazy. So another thing you want to do is look for layers and shoot narrows. A narrow focal length will naturally compress the image, which will make the layers look deeper and more intense and way more interesting. Now, I can only go as narrow as 55mm, but look at the difference between 55mm and 18mm. If all else fails, shoot straight into the sun. You'll get really cool silhouettes and sun flares. Shooting with a black and white profile enabled on your mirrorless camera will actually really help with the silhouettes because you'll be able to see the contrast much better without having to wait to get it into the editing suite. But make sure that you're shooting in RAW. That way you can still have it in colour if you want. When you're trying to make a video about shooting in harsh light and then this happens. Overcast day with soft light. It's exactly the opposite of what I wanted. I've had to shoot this video over like 3 days because the sun kept being overcast and beautiful and soft light, which is very hard when you're trying to shoot a harsh light tutorial. One of my favourite things to do in harsh light is actually to find natural diffusion. You can look for things like this. I'm under my patio here. There's like translucent plastic, and so as I turn, that is actually quite a flattering light. It's really diffusing that harsh sun, and what it looks like is this. These panels, there's plenty of them, are really filtering the light. Now, the easiest way to do this is to just go inside. I know this seems like a massive cop-out, but trust me, some of the best light that I get in my little studio space is actually in the middle of the day. Check this out. And there you go. Now, if I step back a bit, you can see it's really soft. There's tons of light coming in. It looks great. It's diffused. Go inside, get by a window, and that is going to actually do a really awesome job of lighting everything. Okay, so following on from that tip is find an environmental reflector. So this is a little more of something that you're only going to get outside. Basically, you just want to look for anything that will bounce or reflect the light. A white or light coloured wall, for example, will help bounce off some of that harsh light and fill in those shadows. This works for street photography, portraits, or if you're vlogging outside and you can't get out of that sun, you can try to face or stand on an angle to one of these natural reflectors, and that is going to help just fill in some of the harshness. Another thing I've been playing with lately is exposure bracketing, which is awesome and really useful in harsh light. And no, I don't mean that ugly HDR look that was super popular a few years back, but rather a way to stack or blend exposures in post, or simply choose the best out of 3. This will give you a good medium exposure plus an underexposed and overexposed shot, or at least that's how I have it set up on my Fuji X-T4. Harsh light is probably one of the best reasons to do exposure blending in post, because it means you can get some of that contrast back and bring interest to an otherwise kind of boring and flat shot. So I really like it for harsh light. Test it out on your camera and see how you go. Another thing that I love to do when I'm dealing with harsh light situations is to shoot sets of photos rather than a single hero shot. Now, this could just be because of where I am in my photography journey, which is, early. I like to think of it as shooting scenes rather than individual shots. When shooting videos, this is a really important thing as well. Having harsh light can make it more difficult to get that hero shot Instagram banger, but it doesn't mean that you can't tell a story. So rather than trying to get one incredible image at Sensoji Temple in Tokyo in the middle of the day when there was not only a lot of harsh light but also a lot of people, I focused on telling the story of why people come here and what it's like to actually be there. So I'm trying to capture the environment and the feeling, the atmosphere. So it's something that I love to do, and even when there isn't harsh light, it's a really good practice to think of how you can link your images together and tell a more comprehensive story. And that's what I try to think about when I'm doing video and photos. Another thing that I do, not only in harsh light, but at all times of the day, is to shoot with something either in front of or behind my subject. So either in the foreground or the background. Because with photography and video, we are always trying to add depth and contrast, and having something, preferably a bit of bokeh with those more wide open apertures, if you can, but that will help to add that contrast and that depth, especially when you're working with harsh light. Now that's exactly what I did with this image that I took at Shinkyo Bridge in Nikko, Japan, and this was a time of the day, it was the middle of the day, the sun was pretty high in the sky, and I was dealing with a lot of harsh light. Without that plant in front, you end up with only 2 layers, which is the subject and the background. But adding that foreground element really helps add depth to the image, even though the light straight out of camera was pretty flat. So that's another great thing to do in harsh light. Just add a foreground or background element. Another tip, you look for reflections. Light is a necessary factor for reflections in windows and glass and water. And harsh light can give some of the most perfect and clear reflections in these scenarios. Okay, so here are my final thoughts. I think that harsh light is actually better in some cases. I find that harsh light gives me some of the most dramatic shots that I've ever taken. Things do look more beautiful in soft light, but if you want to capture contrast and drama in your images and video, then harsh light will give you shadows and silhouettes and lens flares and reflections. And finally, I think that harsh light is a really great way to add an element of storytelling to photo and video. That's something that I love and I'm really trying to work on. Okay, that's it from me. I've been talking for long enough. I hope that was helpful. If it was, hit that subscribe button. It will help grow the channel. And if you have any tips I didn't mention, drop them in the comments below so that we can all learn together. As I said, I'm not an expert. This is just what I'm learning as I'm learning it, and then I'm sharing it with you. So I hope that was helpful, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. Bye.